XFL working with investment bank PJT Partners seeking investors. So according to a report by Sportico, the XFL is looking for new equity investors in the league. Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Dany Garcia, and Gerry Cardinale's RedBird Capital Partners own the XFL. They purchased the property out of bankruptcy for $15 million plus $9.2 million in debts and payments in 2020. Now, equity investors purchase company shares with the expectation, of course, that they'll rise in value. The equity used in the sale of shares would help fund the league. Quote, part of the PJT's responsibilities with the XFL search is to ensure potential equity investors share the vision of the current ownership group on the development and commercialization of the XFL, according to a person familiar with the transaction. Now, is the league already losing money? Is this part of some kind of long-term plan? Now, remember, the USFL is working with Allen & Co. to help fund expansion in their league. So seeking new equity investors could be a similar move by the XFL. The difference, of course, though, is RedBird Capital holds $6 billion, but many of that stuff goes on to other projects. There's no question about that. Now that the XFL has announced the cities, the TV deal with Disney, and started selling season tickets, I already got mine. This could be time to start looking for more investors. The problem comes with too many cooks in the kitchen. Former XFL Commissioner Oliver Luck had noted that the only way for spring football to work was to have one sole person to answer for the league rather than a bunch of investors. That's why he kind of wasn't interested in the AAF. And he said that multiple times at multiple interviews. It should be noted, of course, that the partnership between Oliver Luck and Vincent Kennedy McMahon ended in a lawsuit. So that part didn't work out. But the theory is correct. You only want to have one person that's going to call the shots, and that not having a boardroom full of 20 people trying to make a decision, then progress slows considerably. Ask anybody who works in corporate America. Now, we'll keep an eye on this news. The USFL, working with Allen & Co., worried some fans, but really it was much to do about nothing. And I know this because I was at the USFL championship game and talked to people in and around the league about that. And that was the vibe that I got, that, hey, this is just kind of par for the course, something not, this is not an AAF kind of thing. So I'm assuming that this is the same thing with the XFL. It's not this kind of AAF, Tom Dundon, rescue us kind of situation. So but we have post-traumatic stress from spring football fans. So what can I tell you? They've been working with the USFL for a while. This move by the XFL could be the same. Now, XFL insider extraordinaire Mike Mitchell posted this later on in the day, that more details when it comes to this XFL thing that is nowhere out anywhere. It says XFL seeking investors to own up to 45% of the league. So, of course, first reported by Brendan Coffey and Scott Soshnick of Sportico that we just went over about the PJT Partners. We went over all of that. The XFL, when we contacted the XFL, they had no comment on today's story. Now, he said XFL News Hub has learned some arrangement parameters and goals for the equity search. So the XFL is seeking investors to own up to 45% of the league. So the XFL is engaged with PJT Partners to raise $125 million in equity funding. Remember, 3 years, $150 million for the USFL. A focused equity raise with PJT Partners, contacting 15 affiliated offices. RedBird Capital is preparing to fund 100% of the equity if needed. So remember, that is a crucial part. That if they don't get anybody, the league is fine because, quote, RedBird Capital is prepared to fund 100% of the equity if needed. So if they get some of it or not all of it, they're prepared to fund it. That's not a problem. So the idea that you think the XFL doesn't have any money, that sentence right there put me at ease when I read that. Although not specified for this endeavor, RedBird could, in theory, assist investors with capital in exchange for a residual interest. New investors could own up to 35 to 45% of the XFL. Sources indicate the league is not looking to sell ownership of its 8 teams. There have been early investors who expressed interest in the league's teams during discussion, we have heard that the XFL, just like the USFL, wants to take those teams and, potentially have local ownership. The USFL is looking to do the same thing. Their plan is 5 to 7 years. We don't know what the XFL plan is, but for now, all those leagues will stay under the one umbrella with the XFL running all 8 teams. Makes sense. The XFL was purchased out of bankruptcy for $15 million. We know about the $9.2 million. The 2023 XFL season starts a week after the Super Bowl on Saturday, February 18th. 12-week season, 43 games as part of a 5-year broadcasting agreement with Disney and ESPN. All games will be broadcast in linear and digital format. Daniel Kaplan and Bill Shea of The Athletic reported that the XFL had substantial rights fees with Disney to air the games exclusively on ABC, ESPN, and FX, to put to rest anybody saying that had no clue what they were talking about the deal. Several sources have indicated that the XFL's 5-year deal with Disney has ad splits, percentages not confirmed, with the network covering production and broadcast talent costs with escalators throughout the agreement to get all along with the initial rights fees. The league has announced its 8 team locations, the 3 teams playing in Texas. The XFL's arrangement with Rev Entertainment, a subsidiary of the Texas Rangers, will see Arlington, Texas serve as the league's in-season hub and headquarters for the next 3 years. The XFL has secured and finalized 7 stadium deals for its 8. The XFL teams will be training in Arlington before and during the season, but will fly out to the respective cities for games. Totally love that. I think that is the best plan. I wish the USFL would do that as well. What does this all mean for the XFL moving forward? Now, you can look at today's news from several angles, according to Mike Mitchell, positively and negatively. A red flag or business as usual. There's a great deal of mystery involved. Let's get into what we know. So RedBird Capital Partners holds $6 billion of assets under management, but them seeking funding is a reality of the space they are entering. And it speaks to their standard practices over the years of maximizing their investments through multiple partnerships. RedBird has several different sports entities under its umbrella. The firm has partnered ownership and interest in AC Milan, Toulouse FC, Fenway Sports Group, One Team, and the Yes Network, among others. The XFL, however, is arguably the riskiest property in RedBird's vast, successful, and diverse portfolio. After all, properties like the New York Yankees, Boston Red Sox, Liverpool, AC Milan, etc. are proven commodities with marginal risks, especially in contrast to owning and operating an upstart pro football league. Just ask MLFB how that went, and the AAF, just to name several. Over the years, many alternate pro football leagues have faltered because of being underfunded or individuals underestimating how much bleeding of finances is involved. Based on what he's heard, Mike Mitchell, I don't think that's the case here. Quite the opposite. For an example of the current reality in this space, the USFL has been seeking funding for up to $200 million since 2021. They enlisted Allen & Co. to help fund expansion in their league. The expansion in question is not added teams, it's added costs of moving current teams to their city, and therein lies the rub for the XFL. Their 8 teams will be playing in their cities, even though it's a partial hub. It will be a much more costly proposition than what the USFL had in 2022 by centralizing their league in Birmingham. Sources have indicated that Fox, who reportedly earmarked $150 million over 3 years for the USFL, spent over $70 million in 2023 on the league. I haven't heard that one before. And that's on the heels of operating a cost-controlling league. So you get the idea. Expanding into markets in 2023 will cost more because of travel, facilities, venue costs, etc. So Fox and the USFL spent $70 million in 2022 having everything in Birmingham. What do you think that's going to cost the XFL in 2023? That's his point. Several months ago, the XFL 3.0 was considering staging their entire 2023 season in Texas, following the same model that the USFL had in 2022, but the league opted to shift from the hub strategy to attempt to better connect with their cities, develop business relationships, and create more viable revenue streams, ticket sales, local sponsorship, merchandise, etc. And I think we learned from the USFL you have to play games in home cities because, for example, in Pittsburgh, no one was talking about. I was in Pittsburgh area. No one was talking about it. Right? That was during the championship. Now, granted, Pittsburgh was not any good. So selling any ownership percentage is a significant story. There have been talks since 2021 of the USFL selling off their teams for a franchise fee, but none of those desires have come to fruition yet, and it may take a while to accomplish that goal. While there are similarities between the USFL and XFL seeking funding, the XFL's Phase 1 is very different from the USFL's. XFL 3.0 will spend more money to get off the ground than the USFL did. Playing into the XFL's favor is that they already have venue agreements in place. The plane is already fueled up as it prepares to take off. Travel costs and benefits of flying out of Texas are a question of another time without a definitive answer. The real question in this story is the type of investors the XFL is seeking, especially considering that team ownership is off the table. And it's a matter of motivation for investors who commit capital to the league. Could Vince McMahon come back? I'm just throwing that out there. Vincent, he's not doing anything. Will buying a percentage of the XFL be served as a means to purchase company shares with the expectation that they'll rise in value over time before potentially selling off the interest? Or will investors seek significant decision-making power as part of their agreement? And that's the Oliver Luck part. That's where details are murky at the moment and can get tricky. The lack of transparency to the outside public can create doubt, something that has always existed for alternative pro football leagues, CMLFB in particular. RedBird Capital has already earmarked 3 years of funding for the XFL, which coincidentally aligns with their multi-year agreement with Arlington. The funding commitment is similar to what Fox has done for the USFL. Now, Gerry Cardinale, co-owners Dany Garcia and Dwayne Johnson have worked on a business and marketing plan for 2 years. RedBird Capital is trying to cover all of its bases, par for the course for what they always do based on their history as an investment firm. However, no matter how much you strategize, plan, and control costs, there's no escaping the reality that owning and operating a pro football league is prohibitive. You must be willing to play the long game and take early losses to survive. And even then, despite all that, there are no guarantees that these entities will eventually thrive. As one respected industry source told me today when hearing about this story, quote, "Profits and league value is the long-term goal for the XFL, but you need funding to bring things up to scale past just launching," close quote. That sums up what is happening right now, but it won't stop people from declaring doomsday, because until the new iteration of the XFL and ownership proves itself, the jury will be out on them. Reaction. Let us know what you think in the comments. Mike Mitchell breaking it all down. The XFL seeking investors to own up to 45% of the league. There's now more questions than answers and answers and questions. Reading, for me at least, reading this makes me feel better. Look, they had the funding locked in for the next 3 years. This is kind of what RedBird Capital does. The question is, who did they bring in? Do they want saying power, or is this basically it start and ends with the chairwoman, Dany Garcia, and they say, hey, you can buy into the XFL, but you can't, but Dany Garcia is the person at the top who makes all the calls in the end. So we would like to hear your opinion, but it doesn't matter what your opinion is because it ends with Dany Garcia. We'll just have to find out. This could be the one thing to put out there, just kind of that it's out there right now. Maybe we get team names and logos coming up soon, and this kind of gets brushed under the table. Let's hope that we get some good, fun, exciting XFL news. But clearly, these guys are smart. They know what they're doing. This is not an AAF 2.0. This is not MLFB. We just have to kind of trust the process, and this is just par for the course. Fingers crossed.